Welcome to the channel. This is Cinex, and this is the House of Glass Chapter 5. I know it's been a long time since I uploaded. It's been about a month, I think, since I uploaded Chapter 4, and I apologize for that. Life has been a lot lately, and but I'm back, and I still plan on finishing this. So, let's go ahead and get right into it. Naruto felt a bead of nervous sweat trickle down his forehead as he was assessed by the head of the illustrious Hyuga clan. He was tall, had long brown, and wore a cold glare that was identical to Hinata's. Like father, like daughter, I guess. Maybe it's the eyes, the blonde thought nervously as he squirmed under the man's gaze. After several more moments of tense silence, Hiyashi spoke for the first time. "Good morning, Uzumaki-san. I trust that your missions have been successful as of late?" he asked. Naruto nodded and sighed. "Yeah, they've been pretty simple. Just a whole bunch of D-rank missions. All we've really been doing is cleaning out people's gutters and carrying things. I think grunt work is the term Hinata used," he replied. The clan head chuckled. "You do realize that you effectively are grunts as of now, correct?" he asked. The blonde nodded and kicked a rock that was sitting at his feet. "You've mentioned my daughter's name. She happens to be what I sought you out to discuss," Hiyashi said matter-of-factly. All of the fear that the Genin had been suppressing immediately flared back up. Oh, what did you want to talk about? I mean, she has been saying that she wants to move teams. Is that what this is about?" he asked. The clan head shook his head. She would not be switching cells. She must learn to adapt despite her dissatisfaction. Not that she didn't complain, because she most certainly did. Angrily. "What I've come to talk to you about, specifically, Uzumaki-san, is my daughter's intrusion on your privacy last night. I would like to apologize on her behalf," he said. Naruto did a double take. An apology was quite literally the last thing he had expected. "You don't need to apologize. She just followed me home. Her reasoning is a little confusing and frustrating, but you don't have to come out here all the way to apologize," he said carefully. Hiyashi pointed at the boy's fist, which was clenched tightly. "You become tense just from speaking about the incident. My daughter is more than a bit insensitive at times, and she has a bad habit of being something of an egomaniac. She doesn't mean well, believe it or not, but she doesn't think about who her words damage and when she speaks," he said. The blonde looked at the ground. "It's not like I haven't called on her a little. I honestly deserve a lot of the backlash I get from her," he said. The clan head sighed. "She has no comprehension of sarcasm in many cases. She's socially inept, to be perfectly honest, which is why I would like to make you a request," he said. Naruto frowned, but nodded, and motioned for the man to continue. "You certainly aren't an example of etiquette. In fact, your manners are quite appalling from what I've seen, but this is exactly why I was not bothered by your placement on the team with Hinata. I would like you to, how do I put this, chip away at her shell, shall we say. Don't shy away from her because she's aloof and proud. Take any opportunity to interact. Do that and she may loosen up a bit," Hiyashi said. The Genin thought for a moment before nodding. "I can do that, I guess. Is there anything else you want me to do?" he said. The clan head nodded. "Keep her safe. Intimidating as she may be, she has limitations," he said. Naruto chuckled and scratched the back of his head. "She's a hell of a lot stronger than me, Hiyashi-sama. I don't think she needs or wants my protection," he said. Hiyashi chuckled. "Stronger, This coming from the boy who pummeled a Chunin with a mob of 1,000 shadow clones? I think you'll choose it just fine," he said. The blonde furrowed his brows. "How did you know about all that?" he asked skeptically. The clan head smirked and turned to leave. "Nothing happens in this village without my knowing about it. Keep that in mind, Uzumaki-san," he said as he walked away. Naruto watched the man as the distance between them grew larger. What was that supposed to mean? Hinata nodded in approval, but Naruto arrived at the gates. He was the last to appear, but he was still on time. Despite his punctuality, he looked quite stressed. "Sorry I'm late. I ran into someone and they stopped me to talk," he explained as he leaned against the side of the gate. The Hyuga girl raised an eyebrow at the explanation. "And who was this person? I mean no offense to you, but I highly doubt a random citizen of Konoha would stop to talk to you," she said. The blonde scrambled for an explanation that didn't involve her father. Aruka was out and about, We talked about what I should expect on my first out-of-town mission. Just student-teacher stuff, he explained quickly. Hinata stared at him for several moments, clearly skeptical. Eventually, she nodded and turned her conversation back to the old man who was conversing with Kakashi. Who is that? Is that who we're escorting? Naruto asked curiously. Shikamaru, who had been silently sitting on the bench nearby, nodded. Yeah, that's Tazuna. Exactly what you'd expect of an old bridge builder. Cranky and temperamental, he said with a chuckle. The group then set off with Kakashi and Shikamaru in the lead. Naruto and Hinata walked alongside Tazuna on either side of him. They trekked on in silence for roughly an hour before Naruto spoke. So, what's this bridge for? He asked curiously. The bridge builder glanced at him and took a sip from his bottle of alcohol. Trade. The Land of Waves will gain a great amount of financial benefit from having a crossable structure to connect it to the Land of Fire. It's extremely important, he explained. The blonde nodded and kept his eyes on the trail ahead. What kind of things does your country specialize in? I haven't done much research on the Land of Waves, Hinata asked. Tazuna made a wide motion with his hand. Anything, really. We have plenty of resources, which is why we're desperately needing this bridge. We're fairly poor as a whole, so such a trade route would be incredibly useful, he said. The Yuga girl frowned at this. From the sounds of it, this is a monumentally important bridge. Why would you only request a team of Guinea for such an important task? She asked suspiciously. The old man tensed at the question, but quickly calmed himself. There won't be anything you can't handle. Just bandits and such, he assured. Both Naruto and Hinata eyed him skeptically, but chose to let it go. The group traveled for several more miles before Hinata stopped, her Byakugan suddenly active. We have company, she whispered. The blonde looked to Kakashi and Shikamaru, who were both halted as well. There were several moments of silence before Hinata suddenly tripped Naruto to the ground and tackled Tazuna. A blur of metallic movement flew over them as they looked up on in shock from the ground. Pay better attention. We can't afford to allow Tazuna-san to be injured, the Yuga girl snapped at Naruto before assuming her stance. The blonde growled and stood up, taking a defensive posture over the bridge builder. The blur of movement then appeared once more. This time, however, Hinata intercepted it with a swift kick, knocking it out of the air and revealing its identity. It was a man with a chain attached to his left arm and a mask covering the lower half of his face. Not bad, little girl. You've got sharp eyes. Unfortunately for you, not sharp enough, the ninja said menacingly. It was Naruto's turn to trip Hinata, which he did as quickly as he could. As his teammate fell to the ground, another blur flew over her head, landing next to the chain-wielding man. Naruto pulled Hinata to her feet and returned to Tazuna. How about you pay better attention? I can't have you dying out here. It'll cost me my head if you do, he said. The Hyuga girl dusted herself off, mentally taking note of the remark, which sounded oddly specific. They both stared at their enemies, who were assessing them silently. The one that Hinata had kicked took a step forward, but stopped, seemingly frozen in place. What the hell is this? The enemy shinobi demanded. Naruto glanced to his left and grinned. Shikamaru's shadow was connected to both of the chain-bearing ninja. Look, even you had to admit that you deserved this. You just sat there. Of course I was going to lock you down, the shadow user said tiredly. Kakashi then made his way to the Genin. Well, this is interesting. These two are known as the Demon Brothers, if I'm not mistaken. They're Chunin. These aren't bandits, Tazuna. I think you have some explaining to do, he said sternly. The bridge builder opened his mouth to protest strongly, but shut it again, sighed. Fine, I knew these two were coming. They were sent after me to end my life. They don't want me to get back to the Land of Waves with the blueprint for the bridge, he said. Their Jonin frowned underneath his mask. Why would two Chunin be sent to kill a bridge builder? Who sent them? He questioned. Tazuna lowered his eyes to the ground. I can't answer that, he said quietly. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and took a threatening step forward. You better, because if we don't, we'll abandon you out here and let you be mauled by these two. Shikamaru can release his jutsu anytime he feels like it, he warned. The old man pursed his lips and exhaled through his nose. A mob boss named Gato sent them. He controls much of the economy in the Land of Waves. The bridge would loosen his iron grip, and he wants me dead for that reason, he explained. The silver-haired ninja nodded in understanding. Well, thank you for your honesty. Unfortunately, these details automatically upgrade this mission from C rank to A rank. Far too much for my Guinea to handle. You're on your own now, he said. Tazuna's head snapped up. Please, don't leave me out here. My people need this bridge, he begged. Kakashi shrugged and motioned for his Guinea to follow him in the opposite direction. That isn't a concern of mine at this point, he replied. To the Jonin's surprise, Naruto, Hinata, and Shikamaru refused to follow him. Hurry up, you three. We don't have all day, he called to them. The blonde shook his head and motioned for his sensei to come back. Look, we've already made it this far, so why don't we just finish the job? It's almost dark anyway, so we should at least sleep on this, he said. Kakashi raised an eyebrow and glanced at the other genin, who nodded. This mission is far beyond your capabilities. Are you sure you actually want to do this? Answer carefully, your lives may depend on it. Literally, he asked. Shikamaru yawned and shrugged. It would be a hell of a lot more troublesome to run all the way back to Konoha than to just keep doing what we were doing. Let's give this a shot, he said. The silver-haired ninja thought for a moment before finally caving to the combined pressures of his genin stares. Fine, we can try this. Don't say I didn't warn you, though, he said. Tazano sighed in relief and allowed Kakashi to lead he and the children down the route for another hour. After the hour had passed, it was pitch dark, prompting the party to set up camp. Although it was quite unusual, Team 7 had certainly taken a step up from D-rank missions. Much on than was perhaps recommendable. Hinata rubbed her eyes and sat up in her tent. She glanced out of its flap and sighed frustratedly. It was in the middle of the night and it was pitch black. How irritating. I need to be sleeping. We wake at dawn, she thought to herself frustratedly. She laid flat on her back for several more moments before giving up and exiting her tent. To her surprise, there was a small fire burning roughly 50 feet from the camp, with a single person sitting beside it. The person's identity wasn't clear from her position, prompting the Hyuga girl to quietly make her way towards the fire. Once she reached it, who was sitting beside it became clear. Uzumaki-san, what are you doing awake at this hour? She asked. Naruto glanced over his shoulder at her and shrugged. I can't sleep. I tried for a few hours, but I gave up after a little while. It's a little chilly, so I made this fire. If the light woke you, I'm sorry, he said. Hinata nodded and sat down across from him on the other side of the dim fire. Is there any particular reason you're having trouble sleeping? She asked curiously. The excitable genin sighed and leaned on his back. Just thinking about a lot of things. Most things to do with this mission. Somehow, something Kakashi-sensei really stuck with me, he said. Hinata raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? She asked. Naruto pulled out a kunai and studied it for a moment before sticking it in the ground beside himself. That this mission could cost us our lives. It's strange that I could die within the thought that I could die within a few days is strange. Strange because it's not entirely unwelcome, I guess, he admitted. The Hyuga heiress frowned. What do you mean? Why would you not be fearful of your own death? She asked skeptically. The blonde shrugged. I'm not quite as lazy as Shikamaru is, but I'm decently lazy about certain things. One of those things is responsibilities. Having things expected of me is stressful. It's a completely new feeling. I've never been expected to succeed or anything close to it before. Kicking the bucket now would mean I wouldn't have to deal with those expectations, he said. The Hyuga girl chuckled to herself. I suppose being the village pariah may have a benefit or two. You never really had to contend with things such as curfews or family standards. It must be a soothing reality to live in, she said. Naruto shook his head. We come from two different places, Hinata. To me, having a standard to live up to sounds like a really awesome motivator. And having a curfew would be a really sweet thing. It would make me feel like somebody cared where I went and when, he said. And to me, having neither of those things sound like a heavenly relief of stress. I suppose you're right. Perspective affects the attractiveness of certain lifestyles, she said, finishing the blonde's thought. What are your thoughts about dying out here? Naruto asked. Hinata thought for a moment before answering the sensitive question. I would much rather survive. I have a clan to lead. I'm not the head yet, but I will be once I turn 18. I would rather not leave my clan's line splintered. Beyond your dislike of having responsibility forced upon you, what do you think about the prospect of dying on this mission? She said. The blonde laughed a bit, his voice suddenly a bit more melancholy. I'd rather die out here than in my own apartment, or out in the street for that matter. I want my death to mean something, you know? He asked. Hinata furrowed her eyebrows. You speak as though his death is likely, she said, her voice containing the subtlest hint of concern. The blonde glanced up from the fire and looked her in the eyes. You really haven't pieced it together, have you? The villagers do a whole lot more than just glare at me, Hinata, he said bluntly. The Hyuga heiress felt her stomach churn for what he was suggesting. There's been attempts on your life, Uzumaki-san? When? She asked. Naruto nodded and pulled his kunai out of the ground. Yep, they take a swing at me once every few months, usually in October. They haven't succeeded yet, obviously, but who knows? Maybe they'll catch me off guard one of these times, he said. Hinata stared at the genin wide-eyed. How can you speak of things so easily? Does your own life really mean that little to you? She asked quietly. The blonde gave her a pained smile. When you've been told you're a wretch your whole life and that you weren't worth anybody's time, you start to believe it after a little while. I found ways to keep myself motivated, but that motivation slips every once in a while. And when it does, I end up in a dark place, he said, honestly, his hands trembling slightly from both exhaustion and emotion. The Hyuga girl felt a wave of guilt wash over her as she recalled her words to Naruto on the Hokage roof building. She studied her teammate, who was clearly doing his best to stay calm, for several moments before broaching an incredibly risky topic. Have you ever become suicidal, Uzumaki-san? She asked carefully. The Guinea tensed at the question, but quickly relaxed. Only once, and I promised myself to never fall that far again. Suicide is giving up, and I hate giving up more than just about anything, he said firmly. Hinata smiled. Hinata nodded. To her own surprise, she found that his words brought her a degree of relief. She then stood up from her spot by the fire and began making her way back to her tent. Thank you for the talk, Uzumaki-san. I'm now sufficiently tired enough to sleep, she said gratefully as she opened the flap to her tent. Before she could fully enter, Naruto spoke once more. Night, Hinata, he called quietly. The Hyuga girl remained silent for several moments before smiling to herself and slipping inside the tent. Good night, Uzumaki-san. And that is Chapter 5 of The House of Glass. If you enjoyed it, leave a like, leave a comment, tell me what I can improve on, and I hope you enjoyed it, and you have a good one.